Hello, everybody. My name is Javier Palomares, and I'm the President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Business Council. Thank you for joining us for this timely discussion about the crisis on our border. A special thanks to our sponsors, LNF Distributors, and also, very specially, to Shay and Becky Guerra for allowing us to use this beautiful setting. This place was Shay and Becky's vision. It's aimed at ensuring the rich Hispanic culture of this region could be protected, preserved, and valued. Please help me thank them for allowing us in their home. Thank you, Becky. And a shameless plug, they've got pieces here that date back to the 1600s. I've already got 2 things tagged, so no se metan, por favor. No bidding, none of that. I want to also welcome our friends from the media. Fox News Network, Texas Public Radio, Washington Examiner, the Associated Press, KRGV, the ABC station here locally, Telemundo, Border Report, The Monitor, CNN, and Reuters will all be covering this event. As the border crisis continues to impact our communities, our businesses, and our lives, it's important that we create beneficial dialogue aimed at creating solutions. This is the only way to solve a problem that has for too long been ignored, or worse yet, manipulated by administration after administration on both sides of the political aisle. That has to stop. Today, we will hear different perspectives from a variety of people who all have at least 2 things in common. First, they all care deeply about our beloved Rio Grande Valley. And second, the only thing they're prouder of than being Hispanic is being Americans. Actually, Gregorio, sabes que no es mexicano, ¿verdad? Okay. We need to remind Greg that he is, in fact, not Hispanic. Greg likes to say, Javier, I didn't learn Spanish, I learned English. We are delighted to be joined by this amazing panel of local leaders who have volunteered their time to help us tell your story of how this crisis is impacting every one of you right here where you live. With that, let me introduce our panel. First, Mr. Greg Lamantia. The Lamantias have owned and operated LNF Distributors, a Budweiser wholesaler, for almost half a century here. Today, LNF employs over 1,000 Americans with 7 locations serving 53 counties in Texas and New Mexico. I was explaining to a certain member of the Senate from the Northeast just how big LNF is. I think he had this perception that this guy sells beer in this podunk little town in South Texas. I said, Senator, let me put it to you this way. LNF serves a territory encompassing over 109,000 square miles. Senator, that is a larger area than the state of Vermont, your state, plus the state of Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Delaware, and Maryland combined. Then I had his attention. The Lamantias also operate a ranch totaling more than 10,000 acres, mostly raising cattle. And it turns out that that ranch literally sits right on the banks of the Rio Grande River. Right next to Greg, I am delighted that we are joined by Monica de la Cruz. Now, Monica is not only a very successful business owner who has owned her own State Farm insurance agency, I think for over 15 years now, but more especially, she is the newly elected and will soon begin serving as a United States Congresswoman representing the 15th District. She's made history in doing this. Turns out that she is the first woman to represent the 15th District in the history of Texas. And amazingly, Monica had less than maybe 5 hours to plan for this. Unfortunately, Henry Cuellar was not able to join us. So that's the bad news. But the better news is that we're delighted to welcome Monica to the panel. Next to Monica is Hidalgo County Judge Richard Cortez, or as he's known in my office, El Mero Mero. Prior to serving as county judge, he was elected the 18th mayor of the city of McAllen, where he began the revitalization of this progressive city. So popular was his leadership that he was reelected and served for 2 consecutive 4-year terms. Then he chose not to run for re-election at the end of his 2nd term, but returned to the political arena in 2015 as McAllen City Commissioner. He continued to serve in that position until he withdrew his seat to run for Hidalgo County Judge, a position he holds to this day. Judge Cortez has written 2 letters to President Biden regarding Title 42 and this border crisis. His opinions and point of view have been sought after by, get this, have been sought after by a variety of well-known media outlets, including CNN, Fox Network News, Texas Border Business, Newsweek, Yahoo News, and Epoch Times, to name a few. Next to the judge is Mrs. Adrian Peña Garza, who is married to Jimmy Garza, who's seated right there, a good friend of our association and a supporter. Welcome, Jimmy. And Adrian, I thought we agreed we were not going to let him in the room, but I guess he got in through the back. No sé qué pasó, pero ahí está. So Adrian currently serves as chairwoman of the Hidalgo County Republican Party, passionate about the mutual benefits of connecting people, strengthening economic development, and the humility found in becoming a volunteer in service to her community. Her passion for advocacy also includes serving as former vice chairman for the Texas Young Republican Federation and former president of the Hidalgo County Young Republicans. She is in her 3rd term as chairwoman of the Hidalgo County GOP and is now running for vice chair for the Texas GOP. She has been credited for the inroads that the Republican Party has made in the Rio Grande Valley. It's funny, when I talk to Adrian, she says, "Oh, Javier, I'm just a mom." Well, for someone who's just a mom, her opinions and point of view have been sought after by a variety of local, national, and international media outlets, including CBS, NBC, New York Times, Politico, Reuters, Fox Network, Texas Public Radio, Texas Monthly, and the Texas Tribune, to name a few. And next to Adrian is Mr. Dante Galeazzi. Now, Dante is the president of the Texas International Produce Association and a veteran of this industry. He has held the position on the association's executive committee for 8 years and served a full 2-year term as chairman of the board. Dante has a vast set of experiences and a very unique understanding of the issues of the Produce Association's membership. The association was formed in 1942 to represent the business, economic, and political interests of Texas-based fruit, vegetable, and produce growers and farmers. In 2012, the association's mission was further expanded to address the challenges and the opportunities surrounding the importation and marketing of foreign-grown produce that was being shipped through Texas ports. Together, all of them have tried to help me more accurately tell the story of how this border crisis is impacting not only them, but all of you, right here in your homes and in your community. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank them for joining us. Now, I'll say quickly as we begin, I would like to remind everyone that we are striving for authentic dialogue that can serve all parties involved in this crisis. In that vein, I would ask everyone to remain considerate and respectful. We are not here to politicize this issue, but rather to hear from people on the front line so that we can learn from those who truly know what is happening here. We will have roughly a 45-minute panel discussion, and it will be followed by about 10 minutes of open questions and answers from the audience. With that, let's get started. We'll begin with some questions right away. Can you hear me here? So Greg, let me begin with you. Now, you operate a ranch that sits right along the Rio Grande, given your proximity to the border. In what way has the mismanagement of our immigration system most impacted your operations?
Well, there's several ways that we've been impacted. I mean, from the standpoint of much more traffic of people coming across river, et cetera. In the old days, when you had people coming across river, they were usually trying to evade and hide and escape and head for a better life. Nowadays, many that come across, que sea from Mexico or Central America, come across and they ask you, where is the chota, where is immigration? Because they want to go claim amnesty, get picked up and, taken care of. The other things that are happening is, petty crimes, breaking in, litter, things like that. And then you have the occasional smuggler that is taking either humans or drugs that are trying to evade, and they'll run through the fence, run through the gate, cattle get out on the highway, things of that nature, et cetera. But I don't want to sensationalize that. We haven't had any real threats or issues. We are more aware when we're on the ranch, but we feel perfectly safe on the ranch. But you just have a better awareness on your surroundings because you just never know. And so those are some of the ways it's impacted us. The other one, quite frankly, that nobody talks about is the devaluation of property. South Texas has been known for fantastic hunting and fishing and wildlife and deer hunting. And what you find is people that are looking for these ranches to buy for that type of activity are shying away from the border, close to these traffic lanes that are happening. So you see a depression in the market price of some of those properties.
Thank you, Greg. My next question is for you, Dante. Our food supply is heavily reliant on immigrants, and we all know this. And you represent some of the biggest producers of food in America. What is the feeling of the local agricultural industry with regard to this crisis?
Oh. Well, I'll take it from two sides. So the first one is the domestic producer side, and very similar to what Greg was outlining, we have a lot of Texas farmers that operate right along the border. That soil right next to the river is some of the best agricultural use soil available in the entire state. So for generations, 3, 4, even 5 generations of farms have occurred on the Texas border. Over the last few years, we have seen a lot of challenges come their way as a result of what's happening here with the migrant influx. First off, you have the wall, right? That's been constructed. That's taken away farmland. Now, it's an important security measure, but that wall has to go somewhere, and it goes right on a lot of that land because it can't go too close to the river due to the serpentine nature of the river itself. But then you also have the security issue. So now we're farming on the south side of this wall, right? We're still on U.S. soil. We're still north of the river, south of the wall. But now you've got farm workers, and you've got day laborers, and you have foremen who have the security access to get through gates. Well, the cartels know this, and the smugglers know this, so they're leaning into those people for those codes. That's a risk and security issue. We have seen Texas farmers reduce their acreage along the river because they are trying to protect their own people, but they do so at economic risk. If they are growing less, that means there's less food available, and what happens is ultimately the food at grocery store shelves, that price is going to go up. I think that's something we can ill afford as we look at as we look at inflation and recession. The other side of what we've experienced for agriculture in relation to this issue has been the inflow of produce from Mexico to Texas. So we cross a little over 250,000 18-wheelers of fresh produce from Mexico into the U.S. every year through Texas. That's about, I think it's about $9 billion of fresh produce coming in every year. If resources have to be moved away from the bridge over to these territories between the legal crossings to address a lot of this inflow, then that means there's less agents to inspect those vehicles as they come across. That means there's longer wait times. That means those trucks are not crossing with the freshest produce as quickly as they should be. And ultimately, that freshness is impacted, again, by the dollar value. And again, who pays for that? The consumer.
Thank you, Dante. Judge Cortez, sir, it strikes me that this crisis has had an impact on the medical educational, and legal systems here in South Texas. Now, you've been very local with the Biden administration regarding immigration and the crisis here. What have you experienced that made you decide to write to the president and get so personally involved in this issue?
I had the pleasure of being chairman of the Border Trade Alliance, which is a tri-national organization of Canadians, Americans, and Mexicans on trade issues. We have had these problems for at least 3 centuries, and the problems that we're experiencing today, we've had them way back then in 1986 when President Reagan offered amnesty to almost 12 million people. My frustration is that I wanted our president to come in and see for himself what we were experiencing, what the people that he has hired and entrusted to take care of us was experiencing, with this large flow of immigrants. And for him to know that, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of most experts, is that you cannot solve this border problem solely on the basis of an enforcement policy only, because that's what we've had for 36 years and the problem is still solved. So what I was hoping for him to do is to provide leadership to change the laws so that the laws will match the needs of our economy. Everybody wants legal immigration. Everybody knows that economists tell you that we need immigrants for many aspects of our economy. So if you want our immigrants to be legal and we need immigrants to come here, then you need to change the laws to make them a little easier for immigrants to come here. So the frustration is that they keep sending us buckets of water, to fill more, to hold more water, which is really what they're telling us even today. I heard today that they were going to send us more capacity to serve more people. But how is serving more people a solution to the problem that we have? I don't know if I answered your question, but my frustration is that this problem we're having and experiencing here at the border will not be solved solely by an enforcement-only policy. The only way we can solve it is for Congress to get together and change the laws to make it easier for us to be able to operate in the present condition that we are.
Thank you, Judge. And it's funny you mentioned Congress. I was going to go to Adrian. I'm going to skip Adrian and come back to her. But since you've mentioned Congress, young lady, you are a brand new, freshly minted member of the Congress. What are your views about what's going on here? What do you hope to do when you get to Washington to make sure the rest of the country understands from your perspective what's going on here?
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I'll tell you this, we're not waiting until January 3rd to begin our work. In fact, our work began the day after I was elected. I can tell you that very proudly, I have begun speaking with the county judges, not only for here, but also leaders in Cameron County. I've had several meetings with the Border Patrol sector, and in fact, just met with the border chief in order to get a briefing on what is going to happen when Title 42 is lifted. Now, I'll tell you this, there are several things that need to happen. I think that both sides of the aisle agree that we need immigration reform. That is not a question. The question is, when do we do that? And first, we have to secure our borders. We've got to have the Remain in Mexico policy back into place. We need to stop the catch and release program. And Title 42 needs to remain in place until we can get some of these legislative decisions made. Because the fact of the matter is that who bears the brunt of this issue are our border communities, including Hidalgo County and Cameron County. When Title 42 is lifted, it will put tremendous strain on our healthcare system. It puts tremendous strain on our law enforcement and our citizens. In our meeting just this morning, the Border Patrol chief is asking the city leaders, where do I put and release these immigrants once we have reached 100% capacity? Now think about that. There are already 4 areas along in Border Patrol that are at 100% capacity. We see what happens when they're at 100% capacity, just like El Paso, where they are released into the community. We don't want that to happen. And so we are leaning on the Biden administration to keep Title 42 in place, have the Remain in Mexico policy, but not only that, is give the Border Patrol agents and custom agents the resources that they need. What some of these resources include are things just as simple as night vision goggles, drones. They need drones in order to do their job, working vehicles. These are things that we take for granted that we believe are available for them, but they're not. And what the repercussion of not having them is that we are seeing the highest rate of suicide among Border Patrol and custom agents, where it has become a crisis among our agents. So they need the support they need.
Thank you, Monica. Adrian, I have watched with a great deal of interest from a distance. I was born and bred here, and I would not have believed 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, if somebody would have told me that there was a movement in the Rio Grande Valley of the community going from Democrat, historically Democrat, to Republican. You've been credited with creating that movement or being at the forefront of that movement. Do you think that there's a correlation between the border crisis and some Hispanic voters turning to the Republican Party here in South Texas?
First, let me just say thank you, Javier, for inviting me to serve on this prestigious panel. But most definitely, open borders is not a safe America. It's not a safe Texas, and it's definitely not a safe Hidalgo County. I have tried desperately, and I do credit a lot of that to my father, Aaron Peña, who was just elected to the 13th Court of Appeals, but he was a Democrat who switched parties in 2010 and helped give Republicans a supermajority. But aside from his labels, he's a compassionate man, and I think conservative on the border are compassionate. And we've been trying to get more people to stand up against the grain and vote for freedom. That's been the talking point. That's been the message, is that it's not about controlling, individuals to vote a certain way. It's to encourage them to think for themselves. And I think that because the national media has highlighted the border, they've highlighted illegal immigration, they've highlighted the devastation that it's done to people living on the border, but as well to our agents. And they're why I'm here. I do still get stage fright. This is nerve-wracking for me because I'm not a politician. But what they're going through breaks my heart. And it's hard for me to stand up here and smile out of nerves because I've heard their cries and I've listened to them talk about, the concern about suicides. And I will echo many of the statements that Congressman De La Cruz spoke. And it's heart-wrenching. And I'm here because I believe that people on both sides of the aisle are going to want to sit down, come together, and find solutions to this immigration crisis. And I do. Yes, there's a lot of negatives about it because we live here. I raise my kids here. The agents and their spouses, they send their kids to school here. They go to the same doctors. They go to the same schools. And for quite some time, I would see them on social media going back 7 years and trying to encourage them to come and support the movement. And they were afraid to speak. This gag order that I think is part of the problem. We live in America. You should be able to speak about the things you see at midnight. You should be able to speak about the heartbreak that they're experiencing because they feel alone. And yes, on the positive side of that, and I hate to even say it, but that is one of the main reasons why we're doing so well down here, because Hispanics here on the border, they do want legal immigration. They do want safety on the border. They do want immigrants to come across and find a better way of life. But we want to do it the right way. And by highlighting all this illegal immigration, by highlighting, the chaos, what are we doing? What does that do to encouraging legal immigration, learning the Constitution, learning the history of our country, wanting to become citizens of this country? So yes, there's been a lot of positive growth, and we're going to continue to do well. But this issue is very serious and near and dear to my heart, and I'm really hoping that we can all come together and find solutions and finally get this done.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. Greg, I'll come back to you. Now, as you know, and we've been discussing this for some time, tonight was supposed to be the eve of the expiration of Title 42. And everybody knows what Justice Roberts has done. I'd love your view on what that truly means, what Justice Roberts has done, and B, if it is allowed to change. What do you think will happen here in the Valley?
Well, I applaud the justice for doing what he did and leaving 42 in place for the time being. The question becomes, that is not the answer. It's what we may need right now to stop the influx. If we don't have Title 42, it is going to be a disaster. The numbers are, you simply, God bless Border Patrol, law enforcement, et cetera, they simply will not be able to handle it based on everything I heard. So it's a good Band-Aid to leave in place, but we have got to do something about total immigration reform, like the judge said. It is not simply enforcement. You need the immigrants, you need the labor, so let's make it a pathway to get this done. So applaud the Supreme Court justice for leaving it in place. It's a Band-Aid. We have to go beyond that. Even what Congressman Cuellar and the Senator Cornyn have put forth, great movement, but that is not the answer, but it can help.
So you're talking about the Bipartisan Border Solutions Act, which Henry Cuellar on the Democratic side and John Cornyn on the Republican side have put forth. That's
Yes,
what you're talking about?
yes.
Got it. Dante, back to you. Given the situation at the border, what impacts has the fresh produce industry felt, and what do you expect to see in the coming months as we go through this transition? What do you and your constituency expect to see?
Well, I think really what we hope to see is probably the better phrasing for it, is we hope to see that CBP and the other federal resources along the border are appropriately deployed. So what do I mean by appropriately? These folks come down here to the border and they work and they have job roles, right? You have inspectors that are doing agricultural inspections at the bridge. You have safety inspectors checking the quality of vehicles. You have people that are authorized to work the desks to process the paperwork of those loads coming in. What we saw previously when there was more chaos of the crossings and you didn't have things like Title 42 was you saw these people being deployed to other roles, right? Famously, we heard about a lot of the high-level administration being put into roles where they were, so busy doing sandwiches and other necessary humanitarian acts for all the people that they had that they were no longer performing a lot of their duties, or they didn't have time to do those other duties that the trade and cargo and all the daily operations need to have, right? Same with the inspectors. They're being deployed to perform monitoring or policing activities, so they're not inspecting vehicles or cargo at the rates that they should be. These all cause delays. Delays cost money, right? Those truck drivers don't sit on the border for extra hours or extra days out of the goodness of their heart. They're performing a job, an economic value, just like the rest of us have jobs. They expect to be paid. Where does that money come from? I'm going to be the first to tell you that the U.S. government is not paying those truck drivers more money to sit there on the bridge. Our industry pays for it. Agriculture, fresh produce. You know who eventually pays for that? The consumer. All those costs get shared downstream. So I think to answer the question, what we hope to see is we hope to see that there is a good balance between leaving the agents and the resources along the border that we need for the efficient economic flow of cargo, and that there is an appropriate response to the humanitarian crisis and the situation of the migrants, just as Greg and the judge and others on this panel have alluded to. You know what? I'll stop there because I could keep going.
Actually, I do have a follow-on question.
Sure.
You mentioned about the price of produce, and
Yeah.
ultimately it's the consumer that bears the brunt of that. Is it your sense that Americans outside of the Valley, for that matter outside of Texas, Americans in New Jersey or Utah or Maryland, is it your sense that they've connected those dots and realized that the reason they're paying more for that head of lettuce or for that orange juice or for those strawberries or for that broccoli has in some way been impacted by what's going on here?
Not a chance. Absolutely zero chance. I can tell you right now, the average consumer, regardless of their location, probably doesn't have a good idea of about how 90% of the costs go into their food, right? Because this is one of those situations. But labor is another situation, and I know we haven't gone down there, so I'm going to just kind of go down this road real quickly. In the United States, along the border, we had 2 million people cross in fiscal year 2020. Department of Labor says that there is 10 million job openings in the United States, but there's only 6 million U.S. citizens available to take those jobs. Where are the other 4 million people going to come from that we need to satisfy that job demand? It just continues to baffle me that we have this group of people entering this country looking for economic opportunity, right? 2 million in a fiscal year that are going to wait around for 2 to 3 years for their appointment with an immigration or asylum judge. Meanwhile, we've got this dramatic need from our economy for 4 million people. Why are we not putting the round peg in the round hole? It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I'll stop there, but I can tell you that overall the consumers don't understand a lot of this because they are getting caught up in a lot of the other rhetoric, the negative rhetoric, the sensational rhetoric, unfortunately. And because of that lack of knowledge, they're not associating that part of the increases they're paying isn't just supply chain disruptions, it's labor disruptions, it's lack of labor, it's all these other issues that get compounded, and that drives up the cost of food and all your goods.
Thank you, Dante. To Dante's point, Monica, it's clear, at least to Dante and to me, that the average American, certainly outside of the state of Texas, has not seen the correlation, has not connected those dots with what's going on here, and ultimately what they pay for on the kitchen or on the breakfast table. He mentioned that it's been politicized. He mentioned that there's been drama and theater, but no real concerted effort, no real collaboration toward finding solutions as opposed to politicizing and playing party politics. As a new member of that club, a very unique club, by the way, and congratulations again, we're incredibly proud of you. What is your plan to ensure that we remove the diatribe, we remove the drama, and start working towards solutions collaboratively across the aisle?
Well, I can share with you this. Before even being sworn in, I have spoken to many farmers and ranchers who have expressed concern about the H-2A program and making sure that they have enough people to actually pick their crops and get them on the trucks. I've talked to the trucking companies, say we don't have enough truckers to get our product from one side of the country to the other. So there does need to be legislation that is passed and made to streamline this legislation. And what I would like to see Congress do is really encourage these immigrants who are making the dangerous track, because it is dangerous track. We all know about the cartels in Mexico taking advantage of them, but that instead of doing that, that they go to safe countries, our friends in South and Central America, and start the asylum process there so that we can get them through the system that does need to be changed. And we do need to work on a quicker, more expedited system to ultimately help our farmers and ranchers who have this need. I do agree with that. And when in Congress, I hope to work in a bipartisan manner to help that area.
Thank you, Monica. Judge, I'll go in a little bit different direction with this question. Do you think the current border crisis and what historically has happened along the border here, but certainly this sudden influx of migrants coming here, do you think that has affected the way the rest of America perceives the Latino community, the Hispanic community of Americans here in the Rio Grande Valley?
Boy, that's difficult for me to answer, but I can tell you from experience, it has affected our ability to recruit investment to our area. We're considered corrupt, we're considered a danger point, we're considered, a bad place to do business. So it has affected us economically. Our future is going to depend on how well we do to invest outside investment to come to this area. Hispanics are already the majority of Texans. They're soon going to be the super majority of Texans. So I'm on the record of saying that we need to continue to invest in the human capital among Hispanics, because that's going to be the majority. All of this has a bad connotation of what some of us represent and what some of us don't represent. So I do believe that it's had a negative impact on us down here.
Thank you, Judge. Adrian, you've spent a lot of time with the wives of Border Patrol agents. Without naming names, could you share some of what you're hearing from them? And I'd also love to learn kind of how this has impacted you, how it's changed you personally.
Well, again, I did kind of tap into it a little bit earlier, but there is mental health issues. There's fear of losing their jobs if they speak up about things that they don't agree with, that they see. There's a concern of the spouses if their husband or wives are not going to come home at night. There's talk that not all people are being processed. There's talk of fear of retaliation if they speak up, they won't get time off to rest and be with family. They're at the core, I think there's some major issues, and I do hope and pray that it gets taken care of. The numbers continue to rise on suicide rates. And really, I know that a lot of people have lost hope. And I think we as leaders here on this panel we owe it to the agents, we owe it to our community to not lose hope and, to help encourage this conversation right now. And I applaud you, Javier, for doing this, because I know that anything's possible. And I'm hoping that some real solutions are done. And people here in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, Hidalgo County, are becoming more courageous and independent, finding that they too can run for office. I think Congresswoman De La Cruz is a prime example of that you don't have to be a political family or be the top 2% of your community to have a voice and to speak up and to be part of the solution to the problems in our country.
Thank you, Adrian. Greg, I'll come back to you. In my opening remarks, I talked about how this issue has been politicized and how administration after administration has chosen to either ignore or, worse yet, manipulate what's going on our southern border. This is not something new. I think there's been a spike, certainly, and there's been renewed attention to what's going on. But you've been here for a bit. You know the history of this region. Do you hope, do you think that there's any opportunity that we will finally get to the point where Republicans are coming across the aisle, Democrats are coming across the aisle, and listening to the people who live here, the Americans who have built businesses, who pay taxes, who raise their families, to find solutions to finally fix this thing?
Well, that's what we need to talk about, and the judge alluded to this earlier. We see all of these programs about the issues of the people coming across, the crime, the narcos, the humanitarian aspects of it, all this type of stuff. And we don't talk enough about the solutions. And I pray and hope that we're able to get there. If not, it's going to just be horrendous. I think that the Republicans and Democrats, Congress and President need to get together and quit throwing rocks at each other. There's solutions to be had. It can be done if they put some of these things to the side. And like the Congresswoman said, security is part of it, but like Judge said, that's only one part of it. And surely we can walk and chew gum at the same time in Congress and pass both at the same time so that nobody feels like, okay, we're gonna pass this now, but how about what we need on the Democrat side or the Republican side? We should be able to do both, and we have to do both. It's incumbent upon Congress and the administration to come together. And if they don't, it's just going to be, again, a disaster.
Thank you, Greg. Adrian, I'll come back to you, and then to you, Monica. Adrian, as a mother, I'm heartbroken when I see some of the images. I was just checking out earlier today some B-roll of what's going on in places like El Paso and Reynosa, and you see children, infants even, in this circumstance, and it pulls at your heartstrings. I wonder if you can share with us a bit about how you feel, and how, when you look at your own, and you look at those kids on the screen, as a mother, how does that touch you?
Well, of course, my kids are here today. They're not kids anymore, but looking over at them, I do get emotional because I know that we're very blessed and privileged to be in this country, to be born in this country. And it does break my heart to hear that kids are being raped, that they're being used as pawns to get over here. There's a lot of issues that our agents see. There's talk that agents don't care about the kids or the families coming across, and that's 100% false. You were saying earlier about the sandwiches. I mean, there's so many other stories aside from that. I just know that I'm not too sure what's going to get any of this to stop. But children shouldn't be used as pawns in whatever scheme is going on. The cartel is behind a lot of the trafficking, and there's no denying that. But it is not safe to come across. And one of the things that I know is not really being said is, yes, a lot of people come over here to work and they're looking for a better way of life. But things have changed in this day and age. There is a sense of entitlement, and there's a gravy train that comes along with coming over here. So they will put kids in danger. They will do what at any cost to come across because they're desperate for a better way of life. But also, we give free health care, we give free education, we give free food stamps, we give free, and so of course they're going to come. And so I think some of the blame is put on us, on what we're offering. I'm not an elected official as far as Congress, so I don't know what all the solutions are. But the children dying, the children being trafficked into sex slavery, all kinds of other things that are happening because the border's open, because of our broken immigration system. And yes, it does break my heart, and I'm hoping that it stops.
Thank you, Adrian. It strikes me when I consider having grown up here myself and being Hispanic and the son of immigrants myself, and a migrant farm worker, former migrant farm worker, the journey that I've gone through, and it's not unique. My story, there's nothing unique about it. There's literally millions of people just like me whose parents immigrated here for a better life, and ultimately we were blessed with that better life. I delivered a speech once at the Women's Museum in Washington, D.C., and it was called 9 Miles. And the premise of the speech was that I was so fortunate to have been born 9 miles north of the border instead of 9 miles south of the border. Had I been born 9 miles south of the border, I would have remained illiterate and uneducated and poor for the rest of my life. But I had the good fortune to be born 9 miles north, which made me an American, which has allowed me to do things that I never dreamed that I could do. I often wonder when I look at these people on television, and I'm a person of faith, and I see the obvious challenges that they're facing, and I think to myself, well, how is it that I got here and that I'm that fortunate? I'd like to hear from each of you, every one of you, just shortly, briefly, if you think about it from that perspective, from the human perspective, because certainly there's laws and there's regulation, and there's so much work to be done on that end. But at the end of the day, we're talking about human beings. Dante, I'll begin with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, if you think about it from that perspective, and how you would like for things to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family very much falls into that category. You know, one side of my family was the farm workers, the other side of the family were immigrants who started farming. They came here because they left their home countries in search of better lives economically and for their families and the future of their families. So they are very much those stories, right? I'm third generation, both sides, thanks to the successes of my family. I think that's honestly what all these people want. They want economic opportunity. They want betterment for themselves and the future generations. But not all of them want to do that here. And we saw that in agriculture through the previous Bracero programs and other programs. There's people who want a different future, still better, still full of economic opportunity, but they want it in their home country as well. At this point, we have made it impossible for either dream to happen. You can't stay here, you can't go back, you can't do anything. So what are you doing? People are working in the shadows instead. That's not a good system either. And without going too far down this road, and to pass it over to the other panelists, who I'm sure all have great stories as well, this is really what I kind of think sums it up is we have been talking about this message from the perspective of agriculture, from the perspective of needing labor and having a good system since the first Braceros program in 1917. Y'all, that's more than 100 years ago, and Congress still hasn't given us a good solution. So yes, I think about it as a humanitarian crisis. Yes, I think about it as opportunity. And I'll tell you what, I guarantee you everyone else in the fresh produce industry is thinking about those opportunities as well. And they're thinking about how can we lean into our elected officials to give us those answers.
Thank you, Dante. Adrian?
Well, you know, being someone that was born and raised in poverty, I do understand what it's like to be hungry. I do understand hardships. You know, my mom's family are farm workers. So it does tug at the heartstrings, and that was a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it. I live in far Texas, so I know what you mean. But, you know, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And I do have children, and I know that if you give them everything that they want for free, they won't work for it. And so I do think that there's opportunity. There should be programs where, you know, you prove that you're part of corporate America. You prove that you're trying to provide for your families and that you're not just coming to get handouts. I think that there is a window of opportunity to help those that help themselves. It was the way I was raised. It's the way that we raise our kids, and I'm hoping that we can continue to do. You know, we do need immigration reform. We do need to help those that want to help themselves, but we should be encouraging legal immigration.
Thank you. Judge?
Many of us have subjective belief, and we usually think we're right. But there's always subjective evidence that can prove whether you're right or whether you're wrong. Americans are relying too much on subjective belief to take positions of choice. As a technician myself, I try to be guided, you know, by the facts and the evidence. We have a system right now that says that if you cross through a port of entry and you say that you are in fear for your life, we have 72 hours to process you. And at one time when they were doing that, we didn't have the ability to test you for an infectious disease or anything. So what would happen, because too many were coming, we were redeploying people from the in between the ports of entry to the ports of entry, really to administer that. Why did I start with that example? That right now it's been reported that there's over 1,000,009 people waiting to be adjudicated on those policies. Okay, so they keep coming, and once they are adjudicated, 10% basically pass the test. So to use a phrase from the Houston space program, Houston, we have a problem. Okay. And when someone tells me, I'm going to send you more people, I'm going to give you more assets to take care of that system, then what is that telling Americans? Is that we're going to continue to have the same problem over and over again. Asa Hutchison was the Secretary of Homeland Security when I was involved as the chair of Border Trade Alliance. He came down here one time to meet with the governors, and he asked me, Judge, am I going to get the truth? And I said, Governor, it's a yes and a no. He said, now come on, quit. What are you saying? I said, no. If you're familiar with the frequency of distribution, that bell-shaped frequency of distribution, you have two extremes, and most goes in the middle. You're going to accurately hear about the very worst that we have here in our borders. You're going to accurately see that, but is that representative of a whole? So if you look at the facts, 61% of the people that have been coming in through our ports of entry are single men, and most of those simply want to come and work, okay? Some percentage are very bad criminals and bad people. So what do we have? We have a situation that we need to fix, and I'm glad that we have incoming Congresswoman De La Cruz that says she wants to spend time to fix that problem, because I believe that's where he is. The stories that we all hear about how great things happen after one generation when an immigrant came here and their children became doctors or scientists or whatever. We want those stories to continue in our future.
Thank you, Judge. Young lady, you're up.
Well, I can tell you this. I am the granddaughter of a farm worker, and he picked melones, and that's why watermelon to this day is still my favorite. I can tell you this, that I too feel completely blessed to live in this great country. And when I talk to people about compassion and immigrants and them remaining in Mexico, I say the same thing all the time. I have a lot of Democrat and Republican friends, and ultimately, we're not red or blue, we're red, white, and blue. And being red, white, and blue, and from South Texas, makes us some of the most compassionate people in this nation, because we feel for those single moms on the other side that are carrying babies in this bitter cold. We have compassion for the teen that just came across and has traveled miles and miles to come over here. And I think that we show this compassion when we look for, number one, ways to house and clothe them over here, but also to look for legislative ways to have them go to safe countries, to process through their asylum process, to come through here and be honored as an immigrant so that they too can have the same American dream that I'm so blessed to have, that you're so blessed to have. And so as a single mom of two teenagers, I absolutely do feel a lot of compassion for the immigrants and for our American communities.
Thank you, Monica. Greg?
Well, I mean, anybody born in the United States, much less Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, is blessed. We're complacent, we're soft, all these things going on that are horrible. My father was a first-generation American, didn't graduate high school, and I won't bore you with those details of the family, but we are completely blessed to be here, to get where we got through hard work, and think about the next, Elon Musk that just came across, or the next Einstein, or the next Rembrandt, or the next whoever it is. We will be fortunate to have those individuals in the future when they show themselves and have an opportunity to come forward and out of the shadows and work and do the things that this country needs. So again, I get back to, we're talking all around it, and we keep been talking about it, like the judge said, and others. We need action. We need to get something done.
Good point. One last question for all of you, and it's the same question for all of you. We obviously know this is being covered by the media. We know that it's being filmed. My team and I will be sharing this with the people at the White House. So I'd like each of you, beginning with you, Dante, to look at the camera and take just a few seconds And ask the president and our Congress, ask them what it is that you want them to do. Tell them what it is that you would like for them to do to help alleviate the issue here.
President, elected officials, and other leaders, we call upon you, as we have for over 100 years, to address the situation specific to what we see here as a very simple ask. Let us have workers. We know that these jobs are not going to be filled by Americans. There's a long history of that. We know that food needs to be picked. We know that people need to eat at least 3 times a day. Help us make that possible. Help us keep food prices in line so that way consumers are not paying too much extra out of their pocket, especially in times of inflation and recession. Help us address this problem today. Don't kick the can down the road for another 100 years. Get together, make it happen. That's why you guys are there. Help us.
Adrian.
POTUS, leadership. This is our opportunity. Elections are over. There are real human beings here on the South Texas border, Americans that are crying for help. Agents and their families, their children, they need to know that you support them, that you're listening to them. Support our agents, support our communities, support small business. Come visit the United States Border Patrol here in South Texas. Come visit and see how it's impacting everyday Americans. I ask you to put politics aside and find a solution to this ongoing problem. Be part of a solution and help join us in this heartbreaking moment where our agents feel left alone. They feel abandoned by this administration. There are countless agents taking their own lives. Please stand up and speak for them. Speak for our community. Thank you.
Mr. President, I cannot say it any better than that, so I'll just say ditto.
Thank you, Judge. A man, a few words. God bless you. Monica?
Mr. President and his administration, I invite you to come down to South Texas, to our southern border, and see for yourself what is happening, the strains that it is putting on our communities, on our law enforcement, and our Border Patrol agents. See the strains that are happening with our immigrants and our friends in government in Mexico across the border. This is the moment that we are leaning into and need the leadership of the Biden administration to secure our border, support our Border Patrol agents, and put policies in place that we know will slow down this illegal immigration that is happening. We must do this now.
Gregorio?
Well, to the president and Congress, senators and congressmen and women, it's simple. Leaders need to lead. Get off your butt and start leading. Get something done. It's real simple. Start doing what you're supposed to.
I have to tell you that I'm delighted at your candor. I'm delighted that each of you made time to come sit with us. And I often find myself having to go to facts to try to move the conversation forward in my role. And so here are a few facts. Right now in America, there are 62 million Hispanics in this country. That's more than all of the African Americans and all of the Asians combined. The purchasing power of the Hispanic community is getting close to $2.3 trillion. That's an amount that is greater than the GDPs of Italy, Spain, Russia, Canada, Mexico, and the list goes on. If you took Hispanics living in America today and pulled them out and created a separate, different, new country, it would have the 5th largest GDP in the world. Hispanics are starting new businesses at a rate of 3 to 1 when compared to the general market. And everybody knows that it's the small businesses in this country that create nearly 70% of the new jobs. So as Hispanics go, so goes the American economy. We also know that some of the greatest companies in the world, companies like AT&T and Bank of America and eBay and Google and Kohl's and Nordstrom's and Verizon and Tesla, were started in America, and all of them started by an immigrant. There's no question that this country needs immigrants. To deny it is to lie to the American people. Our hope at the USHBC is that we can rely on people like you who are at the forefront, who are living this, to inform the strategy of this country for how we move forward. With that, in closing, let me say, actually, what I'd love to do is maybe take some questions from the audience. And you can address them to anybody on the panel. And I'll begin with anybody in the audience. Does anybody have a question for the members of the panel? Or a thought that you want to share?
Dante, you mentioned the Braceros program back in 1917. How do you see that being developed now in this time?
So, I got no microphone, so I'll just speak real loud. Unfortunately, the program we have now is a far cry from the Braceros program. So there was actually 2 Braceros programs in place. Those have since gone away. Now we have a very complicated, very expensive, very rigorous program in place called the H-2A. I won't bore you guys with the technical difficulties, but I will tell you that that program is very, very difficult. It's the only one we have, and it's oversubscribed right now. You've got 300,000 work visas issued every year specific to H-2A. You've got another 60,000 going to H-2B. Those are all single year visas, by the way. So every year someone has to come back and reapply. So not only is that inefficient, that's expensive. DOL has said they don't have enough people to process all of these. Those programs are overseen by 4 different government agencies, and the rate for those go up. So in brief, the Braceros program was fantastic. I'm sure it probably had a few issues, but it's nothing compared to the many challenges that the agriculture industry faces now in trying to bring foreign guest workers to this country just for short periods of time.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Well, then, let me thank Greg, Monica, Judge Cortez, Adrian, and Dante again for offering your time and your perspective on this important issue. We commend you for your unwavering support of South Texas and for speaking up today. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank our panel. And let me say in closing that as a son of immigrants and a former migrant farm worker and a native of the Rio Grande Valley, I have a unique appreciation for this crisis. Sadly, I think the only thing more broken than our immigration system is our Congress. Many of our elected officials on both sides of the aisle have used this broken system as a political tool to drum up support for their party, or, worse yet, to stir up resentment, hatred, and fear. I'd say that the time for drama and theatrics is over. The American people have had enough. Certainly American business has. We need our elected officials to come together and create real change. In short, we need them to do their job. And who better to inform their strategy than all of you, the people in this room, the very Americans who are living right here in the middle of this crisis. So with that, I urge each and every one of you to continue to stay involved, continue to make your voice heard. And on behalf of the USHBC, our board of directors, and our staff, thank you all for coming today, and Merry Christmas to you all. God bless. Thanks, everyone.